Hello and welcome to the Voice of Iron. And today, I wanted to rant a little bit about one of the coolest movies of all time, Pacific Rim. In short, Pacific Rim is awesome. I recently re-watched it. I'd seen it years and years ago. I can't recall if I saw it in the theater or just shortly after it came out in the theater, but as a lifelong fan of gigantic stompy robots, mechs, and the like, I was a fan of it very early on, and after recently rewatching it, I was surprised at how good the story actually was. I'm not gonna lie, my best memories of the film were, of course, the mech fights, particularly that opening sequence where they're suiting up and getting everything ready and, preparing Gypsy Danger. More movies need to do that. Oh my gosh, side tangent, more movies need to show the effort it takes to set up big machines or equipment. Think about all those cool suit-up scenes in the first two Iron Man films, and a little bit of the third, or any of the equipping scenes in a lot of classic 80s action movies and whatnot, where the heroes spend a lot of time gathering their equipment and setting everything together. It's cool to see the main characters, or really any characters, preparing for something. And this is all the more important for characters in a movie featuring something like mechs or vehicles. I mean, think about plane movies, right? Where the pilots and the engineers all have to get everything ready to go. And just seeing, the massive crew that's required to get everything prepared. And as the music swells, we see technicians helping the twin pilots set up. And then, of course, setting up the con pod itself, dropping down, connecting, latching, getting everything fired up, going through kind of that pre-launch checklist, not exactly pre-flight, but that pre-launch checklist, while they're getting everything up and running, and then after all of that effort, seeing it step forth and walk into the waves with a colossal stride. It added to the gravity and the, dare I say, weight of the moment, because rather than just, okay, we're getting in the pilot seat and we're walking, which, it still would have been cool, but seeing the build-up, I don't know why, but that sticks in my head probably the most. And that's a scene that I found myself rewatching repeatedly. The fights were awesome, but seeing how much effort was required to get that thing into fighting condition and then going out and fighting, it built it up and made it all the better. I don't know, that was a bit of a side tangent, but in short, I think more movies should do things like that. But yes, Pacific Rim is awesome. I recently rewatched it, and I didn't realize that after that first fight, the entire first half of the movie after that is very much just character building. Trying to see Raleigh get over the death of his brother, and, seeing Mako's journey of her learning to deal with the trauma in her past, and Pentecost having to eventually realize that he needed to let Mako go for the good of humanity / the mission / perhaps even her own good and his own good. It was a lot better written than I thought it was. Now, I'm not going to call it Blade Runner level of writing, but to the same degree, there was a lot more effort into the characters than I remember there being, because in my young mind, they had been overshadowed by the mechs. But I was pleasantly surprised that, the writing is pretty good too. But of course, I love this movie mostly for the mechs and just the way they handle them. Each and every one of these machines, each and every one of the Jaegers feels like a massive multi-ton machine. For perspective, these are some of the biggest mechs in fiction, if I'm not mistaken. For instance, right, Gypsy Danger itself, the Mark III Jaeger that we follow, is apparently 260 feet tall and 1,980 tons in weight. Alright, that would make it beyond a super heavy mech in Battletech. This thing is closer to a battleship that walks than anything else. And that's fine. It's a completely different setting. Its closest analog that I can immediately think of would be Titans from Warhammer 40k. At least Warhounds, if not full-on Reaver or Imperador Titans, right? This thing is huge. And they make multiple of these things. Sure, they're not all that size and weight, but to the same degree, most of them are in that bracket. but they treat it with the gravity that you would expect from something like that. They treat this thing far more like, well, a ship or a spacecraft than they do a single pilot device. This thing has so many moving parts and so much support from ground crews as opposed to something like, say, a jet fighter. And I love that. Like, yeah, they picked an insane scale to make these things, but they also, I mean, they clearly depict that is not easy to keep and maintain. I mean, my gosh. Part of the plot of the movie is that it's getting too expensive to make and maintain these things, and so a lot of the world governments want to go over to creating just an anti-kaiju wall to protect all the Pacific coastlines. Like, that's their go-to solution after this, because it's so insanely pricey to keep making machines at this size and this scale. But regardless, right? Not only do they treat that, the budget expenditure and all of that the same, but they even invent a problem that narratively is very, very important to the story, and it makes this particular flavor of mech fiction more unique, in my opinion, and that's the fact that it requires 2 pilots. The fact that you need 2 Jaeger pilots essentially sharing one mind in order to move this massive monstrosity is just a very clever way to make this mech stand out. Like, instead of something like an armored core where it's one pilot that can be human, but sometimes they have to be an enhanced human, sometimes wired in, or something like, say, Battletech, where it really is treated very similar to something like a fighter jet, although the neural interface system can mess with you a little bit, increase your senses, but overall it's very much, something like a fighter jet or something like that. And unlike something like a Gundam where it's a mobile suit and, it's very much a narrative tool and things like that, depending on the Gundam series, that gets complicated. It is this massive machine where your connection to it mentally can be just as important as your connection to your co-pilot. Like, it's not just a situation where you've got, a gunner in the back and then someone piloting the motive system. No, you both control the halves of this machine, and it is awesome. And I like that that's not just like a small aspect that they introduce and then just move past. It is the crux of the main character's journey to kind of overcome their own trauma so that they can drift properly together without any sort of incident. And it adds tension, and it adds a lot of, narrative room for each of the characters to grow, and it helps to move the plot along. It's phenomenal. I like the drift aspect of the thing. But ultimately, the movie concept as a whole, regardless of how well they wrote it, regardless of how complicated the Jaegers are and are demonstrated to be, it's just plain cool to see gigantic robots beating up gigantic monsters. It's awesome. And I also like the fact that, like, they went with an alien invasion plot, but they didn't just go with, it's space aliens dropping in. No, they came up with a pretty unique way. There's a lot of unique things about this film. It's very clear to me that Guillermo del Toro cared a lot about trying to make this its own thing while at the same time paying homage to a lot of the genre. After all, things like Godzilla would often arise from the sea, so his justification of, well, how do I make unique kaiju that doesn't step on any toes, but also, manages to still fit that genre? Oh, what if, there's a rift beneath the sea in which these things are emerging? It's an alien invasion combined with, classic tropes like monsters emerging from the sea to destroy coastlines and cities. Awesome, cool, I like that. Also, just a little fun aside, I read somewhere that Guillermo del Toro actually, when tasking the team to design the kaiju themselves, tried to make it to where their bodies looked like, in theory, an actor could wear the body as a suit, which is to say, like, if someone were to make a cheesier version of Pacific Rim where it's just dudes in suits, that someone could easily wear a kaiju suit while someone else is wearing something like a Jaeger suit. And that's just, it feels like it's reverse referencing the genre as a whole, In other words, rather than, this being an updated version of a classic Toho movie or something like that, where that was the case, they are instead doing it in reverse, making something that, if you were to go backwards technologically, could still be depicted pretty accurately. And I think that's really cool. I think that's a neat little aspect. It shows great respect for the genre, and it's ultimately just a lot of fun. And that's really what this boils down to, is a lot of the people working on this movie clearly had fun doing it. I mean, the cast and crew looked like they were having fun. The writing and design team clearly had fun. They were just indulging in the tropes of the genre in the best way possible. I mean, Pentecost's speech, the "Today we're canceling the apocalypse," it was extremely cheesy. And I loved every second of it, because it's the same kind of speech you would expect from a film where someone's gonna get into a giant mech and beat up a giant monster. It's fun, it's cool, and, it brings to mind Independence Day, where the president gives the big speech where, it sounds really cool in the moment, but when you look back at the contents of the speech, you're just kind of like, well, that sure is a speech. I get the same vibes from that, but the thing is, I think that's what they were going for, and it never needed to be anything more than that. Again, this isn't a movie that I'm going to compare to something like Blade Runner for the insane quality of its writing. What I'm going to applaud it for is the quality of bringing to life this really, really cool idea that they wanted to. Like, yeah, the writing's pretty good for what it is, but that was never the point. The point was, look at how cool the giant robot fight is, you know what I'm saying? And ultimately, I think Pacific Rim is really, really fascinating, and it's a shame that Guillermo del Toro didn't go on to make more Pacific Rim films, or anything like that. I did hear that there was a show, which I may have to watch at some point, and I'm not going to talk at any length about what the studio did with the IP afterwards, because it kind of died after that. So, in short, I'm mostly just going over the movie itself, although the setting is pretty fun. I like that they actually addressed how much this has affected the world. Like, the world genuinely feels like it has been significantly impacted by the events of the Kaiju War. It's not just a circumstance where, yeah, we show the giant robots and maybe have the Shatter Dome, and that's about it. No, like, when they go to downtown Hong Kong, there are corpses from previous Kaiju out there. There is an entire street built around it. There's an underground trade for kaiju parts. There is massive construction that has significantly consumed places like Anchorage, at least in terms of their workforce for construction projects because of these kaiju. The people have tattoos and toys of various monsters and mechs, and the world feels like it was impacted by the kaiju invasion. The world feels like it reacted organically. Even just the clippets at the beginning of both the rise and fall of the Jaeger program all helped to lend itself in very small snapshots of what this world looks like. And it felt rich, despite the fact that they managed to condense that into a relatively short runtime. What's the movie, about 2 hours long? They managed to get all of that in there and depict a pretty full world, at least full enough for the premise to feel like it fits in this. Now, of course, it's not a perfect film, and in terms of, giant mech action, I would have loved to have seen the Russian and Chinese Jaegers, Cherno Alpha and Crimson Typhoon, have more screen time and more action. Maybe see them both take down a kaiju on their own, just so that the stakes were upped before they, unfortunately, get taken down and kind of dwarfed in order to demonstrate the level of the threat. I understand, though, that they were short on time. It would have been really cool. And one area where I feel like the studio could have gone with this, and, the team could have gone with this, is because Pacific Rim is set at the end of the Kaiju War, it's set at the end of the timeline, they really could have explored what happened during. There could have been a movie starring Cherno Alpha and its team. There could have been a movie starring Crimson Typhoon and its team. We could have seen team-ups. We could have seen Pentecost's origin story piloting Coyote Tango in Japan. There's a lot of places they could have gone before the Kaiju War ended. And again, I've been told that the animated TV show does this. They set it during the Kaiju War. I still need to sit down and watch it. I think it's on Netflix. But regardless, even if they didn't expand on it, because not everything needs to be this massive, expansive universe. Not everything needs a million sequels and prequels. I'm saying that there was potential there for that, you know, if they wanted to explore the Kaiju War as it stood, but they didn't have to. Pacific Rim was made in 2013, that was over a decade ago, and it still holds up. Like I said, I rewatched it recently, and it feels amazing. The CG doesn't look dated. If anything, it looks amazing compared to some of the more recent stuff I've seen in theaters. It's good. It looks good, it feels good, and the music by Raman Dajwani is absolutely incredible. He did a great job on that soundtrack, and I very much like that Americans have basically cemented electric guitar equals big mechs. Alright, like between MechWarrior / Battletech using a lot of electric guitar in most of their soundtracks, and Pacific Rim using the electric guitar as a primary instrument in a lot of it, and even recent stuff like Sonic 2 having Walk by Pantera play when Eggman first starts using his giant mech at the end of the movie. You know, mild spoilers for that. I'm kind of glad that the American mech genre and rock music is kind of combined, and that's kind of neat to me. And Pacific Rim helped that. I wanted to make a quick rant on, I think Pacific Rim is cool. I think they could have done a lot with exploring the Kaiju War as a whole. I still think that potential is there, but ultimately, if Pacific Rim remains just a one-hit wonder, if it exists as this one gem in the studio's library, then that's perfectly fine too, and I'm glad to go back and watch it every now and then. I love that kind of stuff. I think it was cool, and I just wanted to rant a little bit about that. So, if you like Pacific Rim, you're not alone. That movie was awesome. And that's all I really wanted to say about it. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening to my long unscripted ramble. And as always, thank you for listening to my voice.